My name is Caleb Stephen, and I'm here today with the Creation Guy John Mackay, an International Director of Creation Research. My question is, what is your motivation for doing creation research?
Well, something must motivate me, Caleb, because here am I from Queensland in a dull, cold South Australia. Even had to abandon my leather hat today and put on my nice warm beanie to keep me sort of warm here. What motivates me? Well, I'll give you a recent illustration. I was in a big church in the USA, and the pastor came to me and he set me a question. He said, look around. He said, what do you notice is missing? So I looked around and there was a very obvious gap in the whole church. He said, did you see we've got almost nobody from 18 to 35? I said, yes. He said, well, I've just come back from being a missionary and I've come out of retirement to help run this church, and I've discovered that for the past 30 years they haven't dealt with the issue of the evidence the Bible is true at all. So as soon as the young people got to the end of high school, they left because they weren't just into this religious emotional stuff, they needed facts for the faith. So there's a pretty powerful motivation for me as a Christian who's involved in science and deals with evidence all the time, and as a Christian you are dealing with the only religion on the planet where the facts actually matter, because the God of the Bible is the one who says, listen, I'm not wanting you to believe something to make it true, I'm wanting to believe something because it happens to be true.
Why is creation research so important?
Why is it so important? Well, a couple of illustrations. I had a young man who was an atheist. He came up to me just recently in England. I was preaching at a gypsy meeting. Now, gypsies are about as noisy as those ducks behind us here in these gardens, and they're not just sort of calm lectures or anything. You have to cope with all sorts of unexpected things. And this young man, Sam, came up to me and he said, 2 years ago I came to hear you and I was an atheist. Now, the reason he came was to demolish everything that I believed, because his atheism depended on there being no God. If there was no God, creation couldn't be true, so I had to be demolishable. Okay, now Sam came and he said, actually, I left the meeting as an agnostic. And the reason is simple. You see, atheism is a belief about nothing, based on nothing, which you get nothing, and yet he thought it was scientific. And after 2 hours of hearing the evidence for creation and all the research on creation we've done, he said, I left as an agnostic. I wasn't sure anymore. And then he said, 2 weeks later, I accepted Christ as my Saviour because I couldn't resist the claims of Jesus. So there's a really important reason. There are many people today who are wandering around Australia, America, the world, thinking, there's no way I could believe in God. In fact, one little boy came up to me and he was only 4 and he said, I don't believe there's a God. I said, really? And I said, do you like making Lego? He said, yes. I said, well, have you ever made a Lego plane? He said, yes. I said, isn't it fun? He said, yes. And I said, did the Lego ever make a plane by itself? He said, no. I said, well, neither did the chemicals make your body. And he said, I believe in God now. Now, I'm not surprised, because you see, the God of the Bible, through the Apostle Paul, said the evidence is so clear, everybody can see it and understand it, even that little 4-year-old. He'd just been lied to about God's existence until he thought, well, the adults are saying this, it must be true. But the evidence says exactly the opposite. The evidence is God is creator, and the good news is this God became our Redeemer. So Sam, at the gypsy meeting with his little boy, could actually get to know God for themselves.
Can you give us some convincing evidence of special creation in your field of expertise?
Okay, let's answer that question this way, because most people are so brainwashed by seeing David Attenborough or the BBC or ABC getting up and saying over millions of years Julia Gillard evolved or Kevin Rudd evolved or whatever, right? And it's just so quickly said and so authoritatively said, they never stop to think, hey, what evidence would I be looking for if God created the heavens and the earth? And remember, we said before, there's a verse in Romans that says the evidence is so clear and it's so easy to understand that people have no excuse. So you have to be trained to not see it in order to actually miss it. So how do we open people's eyes? First of all, what we do is say, question, what would the evidence that something was created be? Now let me get this out of my pocket here. All right, would you like to hold that, Caleb? Do you recognise the trilobite? Okay, 1, 2, 3 segments, and do you see his eyes there, the little lenses that are still there. He's rolled up really quickly, and we can have a wonderful lesson on how this guy was buried quickly, because he's still got a few cousins alive on the planet, and they're called forest slaters, and when you touch them, they roll up real fast. And then when you're not looking, or they think you're not looking, they'll unroll and they'll run away. But this guy, see the bottom of him? And you see the top of him? See, he's closed up in a ball. Now, he was buried quickly and deeply, so he couldn't unroll. Okay, now the interesting thing is, you hold it, tell me what it's made of. Right, well that's what everybody thinks. But in reality, I've got the original one at home, because I don't let the original one get into the hands of young people or old people, because guess what they do to it? They can drop it and smash it, and then I have to go all the way back to Africa and go and find some more. These are worth quite a small fortune, because even the eyeballs are still in there. Okay, so how do you make one of these? What you do is you get some, say, latex, and you make a copy of the original, then you pour plaster or fiberglass or whatever with special weighted stuff in it. You feel it. Is it light or heavy? It's quite heavy. So we're trying to make people think this is the original rock, right? And so it's a really good copy. Question, do you think plaster plus the bits of heavy stuff we put in it, or fiberglass plus the bits of heavy stuff, plus the paint, would ever make itself into a trilobite? No, I don't even know an atheist who believed that. They were quite sure that this copy actually was created by somebody who existed before it, somebody's not a part of it, and somebody's smarter than it. Now let me run that past you again, because you'll help all the young people out there to understand this. Why can't plaster all by itself make one of these? Good. Plaster doesn't have the ability. So that's how you recognise a creation. When the end product, like this thing here, is made of stuff that doesn't do the end product. So plaster doesn't make trilobites. If you see a trilobite made out of plaster, then you're instantly looking at the evidence. Somebody existed before it, somebody who's not a part of it, and somebody who's far smarter than it actually made this happen, and it wouldn't happen by itself. Now, I'm looking at you, I can see an eyeball there, I can see an eyeball here, I can see a head, and I can see arms, and you're listening to me talk, correct? And in order for you to listen to me talk, you have to have nerves that go to your eardrums. Your body has to have a computer program that interprets sound, turns it into thoughts that you match against the dictionary. Because if I was speaking in Russian, would you understand it? Because you don't have a Russian dictionary in there. So what you'll find is just my speaking here brings up a lot of systems that are made of chemicals like carbon and hydrogen and nitrogen. Do you know what we know about carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen? They don't do hearing systems all by themselves. And so the theory of evolution that says hydrogen is a colourless, odorless gas, which given long enough turns into school teachers and prime ministers who are atheists, then it's nonsense. Because the creation is seen by looking at the fact that it's made out of stuff that doesn't do what you see here, whether it's people or even trilobites. That's one of the most convincing, simple arguments. Remember the little boy with the Lego plane? How did he know the Lego plane was a creation? Lego never does planes. People do planes with Lego. They're the creator, and in this case, we're talking about God, who is the creator of everything, because you're really good Lego made out of chemical Lego blocks, and God is a really good chemical Lego maker.
Is your interest just creation research, or is creation research a starting point for more important things?
Okay, is my interest just creation research? Well, I'm certainly interested in it, right? And I certainly enjoy bashing rocks to see what's inside, and I certainly enjoy asking questions like, you know, how does that gum tree work? I enjoy that sort of thing, always have. My mother said, you know, the first time she saw me interested in this was when I bashed rocks to see what was inside them. And nobody else even thought of doing something like that. So I've always been interested in what's commonly called research. But when you ask me, is creation research the end point or is it just a starting point? The one thing I noticed, particularly when I first read the Bible, was it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it doesn't say, in the beginning creation, it says, in the beginning, God. It doesn't say, in the beginning what, it says in the beginning who. So what you'll discover is that those people who are just interested in the things that are made, then they fall short of finding out the real issue. I mean, if I saw a Lego plane, then I really should be saying somebody existed before that. Where is the person who made this Lego plane? Oh, simple analogy. Have you read the story of Robinson Crusoe? Oh, you have. When he got up on the beach, he saw a footprint in the sand. What conclusion did he reach? Was there anybody on the island if there was a footprint in the sand? Probably. Well, do footprints make themselves? And in this case, because he was all alone, it was really important that he found the creator of that footprint. Now, when you're looking at the universe here, it's fun to say, wow, how does the sky work? Why doesn't it fall down? Why is that tree standing up? Why don't trees grow the other way? It's really interesting. But in the end, you'll reach the conclusion it didn't happen by itself. But if you stop there, what a sad stopping point when you should be saying, who actually did this? I remember one of my friends who's a professor, and he was one of Australia's experts on studying the microscopic structures of leaf cells. And when I interviewed him, he said, John, he said, I looked down, took pictures with our electron microscope, and he said what was inside these cells was more complicated than what was in the microscope. And he said, I knew the microscope didn't happen by itself, so I set out to find who made the cell. And he said, now I know his name is Jesus Christ. And he's discovered not just the thing, but the who, and better than that, he's now got eternal life because Jesus is his Saviour.
What are the implications of a Christian not believing in the literal account of Genesis?
What are the implications? That means if A is true, B follows. If B is true, C follows. And D, it's like following a roadmap. If this roadmap is correct, then I hopefully will get to the other end. But if I switch on my Google Maps and all of a sudden the satellite goes kaput, it could lead me anywhere. And the implications would be I get lost, I have an accident, I drive over a cliff, anything like that. So what are the implications of believing creation, and what about an implication if a Christian says, yeah, I believe in Jesus, but I don't believe in creation? Do you remember the first miracle Jesus ever did, Caleb? He turned water into what? Okay, now, I haven't met many Christians who say, I couldn't believe that. But in reality, if you claim you could believe Jesus turned water into wine, which is really turning H2O, hydrogen and oxygen, into C2H5OH, where the C is carbon, he's inventing carbon like that. So it should be possible for you to say, hey, if Jesus can invent carbon by speaking, then inventing planets by speaking is no harder at all. You've got the ability to actually do that. But here's what you discover. If you have a look at the Bible, which starts in Genesis, within the beginning God, and it starts in John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word made all things. If you say, hey, I can't believe that stuff back in Genesis, then really what you're doing is saying, Jesus, you're a liar. Because he said he created all things. Now, if you and I were friends, and one day I came to you and said, hey, Caleb, you're a liar, and you've only been telling me the truth, how would you feel? Would you like it or would you not like it? How would our friendship get on? I mean, you now think, well, I think you're a liar, and you're offended by that, so our friendship begins to break apart. So any Christian who says, yeah, well, I believe this bit about getting out of hell, but I don't believe Jesus could create, really they've just called him publicly a liar. And secondly, things like, you make the age of the earth millions of years, the bigger you make the age of the earth, the smaller you make Jesus. Because he's the God who could not only turn water into wine like that, he could make the universe in 6 seconds if he wanted to. But because he tells the truth, he said he made it in how many days? 6 days. How dare you or I or anybody call him a liar?
We're talking to the creation guy, John Mackay, International Director of Creation Research, and we thank him for his time, and we hope you enjoyed this episode.